Hey there, welcome back to Total Geek Live Baltimore Presents. I'm Baltimore. Today I am bringing you Acts of Vengeance. That is the December 89 through February of 90 kind of crossover event. Not necessarily an event, but it's kind of like a theme is a better way to describe it. It was pretty cool. So the villains of the Marvel Universe kind of got tired of being defeated by the same hero again and again and again. And so a mysterious villain comes to the Red Skull, Magneto, Wizard, Doctor Doom, Mandarin, and Kingpin, to come together to say, how about, this isn't working. Let's try to switch it up. So people who fight usually, Doctor Doom and Fantastic Four, let's switch it up. How about you fight, the Avengers or Thor or Darkhawk or someone like that, so that you have a better chance of actually winning. And so it's like, well, yeah, that would make sense, like try to switch it up a little bit and see what happens. It's a really kind of cool, idea. And so basically these were all kind of three-parters for each of the issues, for each of the comics that tied into it, with the exception of, a little one-part or one-off issue here and there. But it kind of encapsulated almost the entire Marvel Comics run. All the comics that were being published had some sort of Acts of Vengeance tie-in. So that was kind of cool, that everything was kind of, being overrun by the villains for these 3 months. So that was kind of neat. Of course, you have the main issues, the main kind of focus of it was the Avengers and Fantastic Four. So they were the kind of ones who were kind of like really involved in this kind of through line for, the whole story. So you have these villains teaming up. And what I thought was really fascinating, I'm so glad it happened, is, okay, you have Red Skull and you have Magneto. You have basically a Nazi character and someone who survived the Holocaust. Supposed to be on the same side? Yeah. So that didn't go well, and it was awesome. Magneto kind of basically took down the Red Skull and left him basically to die. Almost like up to his head in water with no food, completely shut out and left to die because of what he did back in, World War II. And that was a really kind of cool thing to see. And I think that takes place in the Captain America issues. So you can go and trade and find those out. But it was really kind of neat because you had a lot of villains attacking heroes that they'd never really fought with before. So that was a neat kind of seeing that kind of change happen. You had Thor fighting the Juggernaut, which was cool. You had Fantastic Four versus, the kind of beginnings of the Superhero Registration Act, which come back up much later in the Civil War. You have Iron Man versus Wrecker from the Wrecking Crew. You have Avengers versus the UFOs, which are, a Fantastic Four villain. So that was kind of cool to see, that kind of happen. Daredevil versus Ultron, because that's a fair fight. You have X-Factor with Caliban and with Apocalypse. You have the New Mutants, and then you have Wolverine versus Tiger Shark. And probably, you have Doctor Strange also with fighting the Hobgoblin. And probably one of my favorite of the issues would have to be the Uncanny XMen, because it was pretty dynamic. I mean, this is, of all the things that happened, not much of them made a huge difference or a lasting change. But this one did. Because you had the X-Men going up against the Mandarin. And what happened in there is Psylocke, who was an X-Man, telepathic X-Man, was found by Mandarin, and he changed her into his Lady Mandarin. And so she was not possessed, but she was mind controlled, and used, his 10 rings of Mandarin to try and fight Wolverine and Jubilee. And so it was really fascinating. This is when the body switch happened. So Psylocke was no longer the British Betsy. She was now in the Japanese body, Quanon. And, the story gets muddled and changed a little bit here and there. But to see this happening, it was really kind of cool. And this is kind of like the first part of the psychic knife for Betsy. And it's all Jim Lee art. So it was stunning. And major changes super important and lasting. So that was really cool, really great to see. You should check out that one for sure. But you have a lot of creators on this, so there's a lot of hands going in. You have John Bryan, you have Tom DeFalco, Mark Grunwald, Chris Claremont, Walter Simonson, Louise Simonson, Dwayne McDuffie. So there's a lot of things going on. Almost all the titles. Alpha Flight had an issue. Quasar had issues with this. Acts of Vengeance. So it was kind of cool to see all of the things that were happening, and who was fighting against whom. And then in the end, we find out that the mysterious villain was actually Loki, and he was yet a mad again about Thor. So that's why he was coming up and doing this. So it was a great kind of capsule for what was going on with Marvel at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, what they're kind of trying to do and accomplish and kind of bring to the forefront this kind of dynamic with the villains kind of being a little bit more bloodthirsty or cruel or mean, or trying to really kind of upset the apple cart. So that was kind of fun. It could be a little, confusing to read upon reading again, because they're all different titles and they don't super duper tie in. They're just kind of thematically linked to each other. But they have 2 trade paperbacks out, which you can find pretty easily. One is the Acts of Vengeance with the main series, and the other one has all the crossovers. So I definitely think you should definitely pick up both of them, read them, because I do think they have a lot of value. There's some of the tie-ins that are less successful or as cool as the others, and you have varying art because the art teams were all different. But I think it was really kind of cool. Another thing that kind of came out after this is the destruction of the Hydra Base. So for a while, the Avengers were holding up on the Hydra Base for their headquarters, and because this got destroyed, they moved back to the mansion. So that was kind of a neat kind of implication of what the Acts of Vengeance did. It kind of forced them to move back to the Avengers Mansion and kind of set the stage for the rest of the 90s for them. But I think Acts of Vengeance was a lot of fun. It was a really interesting take on the heroes or the villains kind of changing the rules a little bit and mixing it up. And I thought, to varying degrees, it was successful. And it's something that I feel like they kind of came back to with the Dark Reign, which happened a few years ago when the villains kind of, ascended to the hierarchy of Marvel Universe. So this kind of, was the precursor to that. Villains trying to team up with each other and figure out how to win, basically, and stop the heroes from always winning. So it was a really kind of cool concept. It was interesting, the way that the entire editorial staff went about creating the Acts of Vengeance, because you can see some of the real big story parts taking place in the Avengers and in Fantastic Four, and then you have Captain America and Thor and Iron Man. But then you have like the tie-in stories that kind of gave a little bit of heat and a little bit of rise to some of the other forces at play. The Doombots fighting Punisher, Alpha Flight with their issues with their government, and their tie-in was fun. And it kind of just really highlighted a lot of characters, fighting characters that they don't normally fight. And so those were kind of like, that's a win for the fans. You could see, I wonder what would happen if, Namor fought Stiltman. Well, let's do it. So that was kind of like the off the wall, like throw everything, see what sticks, and kind of like run with it. So for that, we were all kind of, given a gold for that. But you should definitely try and check these out. 2 trade paperbacks, like I said, or you can count down, all the single issues if you like. But let me know what you think about Acts of Vengeance. I want to know actually what was your favorite Acts of Vengeance story. Was the Uncanny XMen one with the Mandarin and Psylocke? Was it the Avengers one with the UFOs? Tell me which one you liked the best, which one was the most kind of impactful to you. Sound off below in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share. And as always, it's all geek to us.